And so, then from him, I kind of learned, I was awoken, to the fact that it's just annoying. It just gets tangled up. It's just another thing to wash.
But this is just the oddest thing that I've ever heard.
Why?
Because you need a top sheet.
Why?
For what?
You know I'm a minimalist when it comes to housework. We've discussed this before, including the making of beds issue.
Because it's an obvious thing.
Don't. You're wasting your own time.
You have a mattress, you've got the underlay, you've got a bottom sheet,
and
you've got a top sheet.
No,
you
get tangled up in it. You don't know whether, do you fold it over the top of the duvet or do you put it underneath? And then where do you get in? Do you get in between? No,
that's right. My producer rightly says, what are these people doing that they get tangled up?
Well, obviously we have more fun than you. No.
If it's done all tight, I roll around, I pull it everywhere. Yeah, that's true.
What are they doing? What are you doing, Eli, in your bed?
A lot of activities you can do in a bed.
You could be a restless sleeper.
No, hang on. I just want to pull you up on this. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, that you don't have a top sheet in your bed.
Why is that so ridiculous?
Because you've got to wash the duvet cover more, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and you don't have to wash the top sheet ever. It's not that much bigger than a sheet.
What's the big deal?
And honestly, to make your bed, you just kind of fluff the duvet up, lay it down. You don't have to tuck this thing in either side.
You don't even have to straighten the bottom sheet.
Exactly.
Who sees it?
Yeah.
But my producer rightfully says, then you have to keep stuffing the duvet back in the duvet cover.
That is annoying,
You see?
You need help with that.
Yeah, that is the one downside, but I would say it's a small one.
Secret tip, you don't actually have to change your sheets as often as you think.
Another one. All right, now apparently, this really got me, and this actually kind of shocked me, bar soap, okay? Your bar of soap? On its way out.
I'm confused by this one because it said that millennials in particular rejecting bar soap. But I thought we're meant to be going back to bars because bottles are so wasteful that you should, there's bar shampoo now and bar body wash and bar conditioner, so you never have to have a bottle. That's what I thought we were doing. But apparently I'm not a true millennial.
It's all liquid soap.
Yeah.
People now have those dispensers in their showers, don't they? And they just...
I have never seen a dispenser in a shower.
No, it's a silly idea.
I love a good bar of soap.
Yeah, and especially when you go overseas, you can just buy a fragrant bar of soap, which you're not allergic to. Freshens up your linen cupboards, and then you can use it. It's lovely. And you can use sunlight soap for getting those stains out.
Yep, washing your hair.
The sad thing about a bar of soap is that there's always a hair on it, and you're like, whose is that?
Is that what you think about?
Soap etiquette.
Yeah. You've never seen a hair on a bar of soap and thought, I wonder which member of the family that's from.
So when you go home this afternoon to your partner and you decide to wash your hands, what will you wash your hands with?
Oh, to be honest, not bar soap. Yeah, the foaming hand wash. Yeah, and I love it.
Interesting. And finally, and this again shocked me, apparently dining room tables are on the way out.
That is a shocker.
With many people opting for a coffee table instead, or the kitchen island.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No. No, I won't let my kids eat in front of the TV or on the laps. On the coffee. No, they've got to sit down and talk to us.
That's the one.
Oh,
you're on it.
Only time all day.
That is what I like to hear on the panel.
Good conservative values here on RNZ.
Nah, in front of the TV.
Eli Masterson, welcome to the panel. You've been great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alexia Russell, thank you so much. What a wonderful show. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, allegations of lies, thieving and witch hunts, and that's just the preamble to the budget. So who's telling the truth? The government concedes big money's needed to fix our ailing mental health system. Today, it's sort of committed to 38 of the 40 recommendations from its own inquiry. The mother of 2 boys killed in an Easter road crash is offended by the sentence given to the driver responsible. Thousands of teachers down tools but still deliver a lesson to the government. Why was defamed businessman Matt Blomfield detained and searched by customs? And what does Destiny Church have to do with illegal vineyard workers?
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. The Finance Minister denies making any accusation of hacking against the National Party. Nationals leader Simon Bridges has gone on the attack, saying Grant Robertson has falsely accused his party. The Treasury has said it found evidence of a deliberate and systematic hack of its systems following the release of budget information by National and referred the matter to the police. Mr Robertson's office released a statement last night about the hack and the National Party. He denies it was an attack on the opposition party.
I don't believe I've done anything to regret at all in this situation. I'm actually very focused on delivering the budget tomorrow. This material came into the public arena yesterday. The Treasury gave their advice about what they believed had happened and referred the matter to the police. I've merely reflected Treasury's advice.
Grant Robertson. National won't say where it got its budget information but denies any illegal behaviour. A criminal lawyer says whoever accessed the budget information prematurely could be liable for prosecution. Treasury says it has evidence it was the target of a cyber attack that involved 2,000 attempts to breach its systems in 48 hours. Len Anderson, who is the president of the Criminal Bar Association, says unauthorised access is covered under the Crimes Act and the test is pretty simple.
Documents that are put on the internet that are there publicly, there's a general invitation to view them because they are public. But if they're put behind some kind of firewall, then the issue of authorisation to access applies. And it's just like if you think of a locked car, people try millions of keys and eventually find one that fits. That doesn't entitle them to open the car door.
Len Anderson says despite how easy it is for the information to be found, if you're not authorised to view it, it is a crime. The family of a young man who died in the care of Waikato District Health Board have cautiously welcomed the government's response to the Mental Health and Addiction Inquiry report. The inquiry recommended sweeping changes, including a suicide reduction target and the establishment of a mental health commission. The government today announced plans for such a commission, but no suicide reduction target. The family of 21-year-old Nikki Stevens, who a coroner found died of preventable suicide after walking out of the DHB's mental health facility, say the government gets a pass mark for its response. They say in a statement some of the indications are positive, but not enough detail is provided on what actions will be taken on other recommendations contained in the report. The first ever joint strike by primary, secondary and area school teachers shut most of the country's 2,400 state and integrated schools today. Thousands of members of the Educational Institute and the Post-Primary Teachers Association took the action in support of their collective agreement claims. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Today's strike was the first by secondary teachers, but the third in less than a year by primary teachers and principals. They're angry the government is refusing to improve its offers to them, saying too many teachers are burning out and leaving the profession because of high workloads and inadequate pay. In Wellington, the Education Minister Chris Hipkins told strikers the government was addressing their complaints, but it could not do everything at once. The PPTA has further action, including rolling one-day strikes planned for next month, and the Education Ministry is trying to bring both unions to facilitated bargaining. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
The Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Christchurch Mosque attacks has held initial meetings with government agencies and members of the Muslim community. The inquiry, which will be headed by Supreme Court Justice Sir William Young, officially started work this month. In its first official update since forming, the Commission says it has met with officials from the GCSB, Police, Customs and New Zealand Security Intelligence Service. The Commission says initial meetings with Muslim communities and religious leaders have been also held in Christchurch, and work is underway to organise further meetings and engagements with those groups. The Commission, through local imams and the Christchurch Muslim Liaison Group, has offered to meet with affected families. The Southern DHB will review its changes to maternity care after the birth of a baby in an ambulance at the side of the road in Southland. The birth came after Lumsden maternity services were downgraded this year, despite protests from locals. The Chief Executive, Chris Fleming, says while the review will focus on the implementation of maternity care changes, not the strategy itself, it will also look at the specifics of the Lumsden case. Mr Fleming says he wants to know about the care the mother received, the decision-making, and if the DHB's changes played any role in what happened. A new lobby group whose members include the former Reserve Bank Governor Don Brash is calling on the government to appoint a commissioner to take over Auckland Transport. Open the Books also includes the road safety campaigner Clive Matthew Wilson, anti-AT protester Lisa Prager and Ponsonby travel broker Jim Cato Simons. Mr Matthew Wilson says AT appears to see itself as a sovereign state that is not subject to the will of ratepayers. It's 5:05. While the thought of a hat-trick of netball premierships is at the back of their mind, Southern Steel co-captain Gina Crampton says they can't afford to dismiss the Northern Stars in tonight's elimination final in Invercargill. The winner will play the Pulse in the grand final on Monday. The two sides have met 3 times this season, with the Steel winning 2 of those, and they haven't lost in Invercargill in 3 years. But Crampton says elimination netball is very different.
The first time we met them was actually our first game, so we couldn't really take a lot from that. I don't think our connection worked there, and we had a really close game with them, and then that last game it just sort of blew out. It's hard to take much from any of the games really, but I think important for us when we play the Stars is that we know any turnover we get, we need to score it. It's going to be a tight one.
Centre Pass is at 7:40 tonight. Despite contrasting results in their World Cup warm-up matches, the Black Caps captain Kane Williamson has declared himself satisfied with where his side is at ahead of their tournament opener against Sri Lanka on Saturday. New Zealand slumped to a 91-run loss to the West Indies this morning, having enjoyed a 6-wicket win over India at the weekend. Williamson says both matches were very valuable.
You can't ask for too much more when you have warm-up games like that, where you get guys executing different skills and they come here on a very small ground, on a good surface and get put under a huge amount of pressure. So a really good hit out all round.
Kane Williamson. That's the news.
The demands.
Well, I've got a friend who moved to Darwin because of the stress. Third-year teacher, she's on the same salary as me as a 20-year teacher.
The numbers.
It was someone who tried not once, not twice, in fact over 2,000 times to attack.
And the politics.
There has never been a distraction in my time to the extent of this. This has blown all of that out of the water.
The Labour-led government will tomorrow deliver its first and much anticipated wellbeing budget. It's been a year in the making and is now mired in last-minute controversy. Join me, Susie Ferguson, for our budget special at 2 o'clock tomorrow here on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Severe weather warnings and watches are in place for many areas. Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taihape, mainly fine today. Isolated showers tomorrow, more frequent for Taranaki and Waitomo, with possible late thunderstorms. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine apart from showers and gale norwesterlies for Wairarapa tomorrow. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taumaranui, Taupo, Nelson and Marlborough. Rain spreading north this evening and tomorrow, with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms in the west. Severe gale northerlies for exposed parts of Wellington and Marlborough tomorrow. Bulla, Westland, Fiordland, also Canterbury High Country. Rain with heavy falls and squally thunderstorms. Strong norwesterlies, gale in exposed places. For the remainder of Canterbury, also North Otago and Dunedin, mainly fine, variable high cloud, norwesterly gales. Central Otago, Clutha and Southland, scattered rain clearing later tomorrow, norwesterly gales. Chatham Islands, showers this afternoon, fine tomorrow, possible late fog. RNZ National with Indira Stewart and First Up, back from 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. The time now, 5:08.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The government is promising that significant and sustained investment in the mental health sector starts with tomorrow's budget. In response to the mental health inquiry, the government today announced it would quickly set up an independent new commission and widen access to mental health services. But it's refusing to set a target for reducing suicide or to act on alcohol or personal use of controlled drugs, and gave no specific funding details. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
A high-profile mental health and addiction inquiry led by Ron Patterson recommended major changes in mental health 6 months ago. Today, the Prime Minister announced at an event hosted by Newtown Union Health in Wellington that the government will accept or consider almost all of the inquiry's recommendations. But Jacinda Ardern drew the line at setting a target for reducing suicides, which reached 668 in the 2017-18 year.
There wasn't an evidence base that said if you have a suicide reduction target, that it reduces the number of suicides. And at the same time, we were very wary of sending any message, particularly to bereaved families, that there was a tolerance for suicide in New Zealand. Every single life matters.
Ms Ardern also ruled out the stricter regulation of alcohol sought by the inquiry.
Those issues are conscience votes, and that was a long process that many parliamentarians have already gone through. What we have said is that, yes, there's work on advertising and so on, but actually when it comes to our response in this case, it is around the lack of availability around treatment services.
Replacing criminal sanctions for the possession of controlled drugs for personal use with fines or referrals was also rejected on the basis it's already been addressed by Parliament. That's disappointed the Drug Foundation Executive Director Ross Bell.
You can't extract some of the things and say, well, we're not going to do all of these things. So, yeah, we are disappointed the government hasn't come out and said, we've heard it from the Law Commission, we've heard it from this inquiry, we will reform our drug laws properly.
The Health Minister David Clark said work has already begun to set up a new mental health commission to oversee services and hold the government accountable.
We'll have an announcement tomorrow around funding, but now that we've accepted that in principle, we want to get on with it.
He added the changes will transform mental health and broaden access for those who need it.
And that doesn't matter as to what level of distress they have. The report itself points to the missing middle, those in New Zealand who haven't been able to access services readily. Of course, training workforces, training peer support workers will take time. So this transformation will take time, but we're determined to get on with it.
That's welcomed by Marion Blake, the Chief Executive of Platform, which provides services in the community. She says the wider scope means they'll be able to do far more in future.
It's an opportunity to use the whole of the community sector to actually look at issues around housing, employment, looking about trying to increase access to some services. So I just think it's a great opportunity to really begin to change the mental health system in New Zealand.
The figures backing up today's pledges will be revealed in the budget tomorrow. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Karen Brown, tēnei.
And after the 5:30 headlines, we'll be talking to the Health Minister David Clark live. After 6, Logan Church meets a Christchurch family who's seen their mum go in and out of mental health facilities and says the government needs to back up its promises. We're really keen to hear what you think on the government's response. Well, what we know about it so far at least. Are they doing enough? You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 12 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thousands of teachers chanted, shouted and marched into towns and cities around the country today in the first ever joint strike by primary and secondary school teachers. And they're vowing to strike again if the government doesn't up its offer. Members of the Educational Institute and the Post-Primary Teachers Association joined forces to shut most of the country's 2,400 state and integrated schools today. They say the government's offer is inadequate and they're angry it's refusing to commit any more money to the deal. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
Today's strike was the third in less than a year by primary school teachers and principals, but the first for secondary teachers. And in Wellington's Civic Square, it was clear they had plenty of energy for it.
We're not going to take it. No, we're going to take it.
Both groups of teachers have been offered 3 pay rises of 3%, and primary teachers have also been offered a new top step on their salary scale. They've rejected those offers because they want better pay and working conditions, including more non-teaching time, and today they took that message to the streets. In Auckland, an estimated 15,000 striking teachers marched down Queen Street.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Toko Jr., who's been a teacher for less than a year, says the government needs to listen and take action.
I think at times we feel like we're not being heard, and I just think it's not about the money. You know, everybody says the money, but there were other issues within the schools, like even overcrowding at the moment. As a BT, I've come into the profession like, wow, we don't have enough teachers, there's not enough spaces, but we have so many children that need to be addressed, that need to be catered for.
Despite the issues facing his profession, Toko Jr. is encouraging others to become teachers.
Look at these people, they make changes in people's lives, our young people's lives.
Anya Burlad says she never could have imagined how intense her workload would be when she became a teacher.
When I signed up to teach and it was my first placement, I was like mind blown. I couldn't comprehend the amount of work teachers put into it and don't get any recognition or pay or anything for it. And I struggled that whole year kind of just comprehending that.
In Christchurch, protesters packed into Victoria Square before surging through the central city to shout their demands up at the local Ministry of Education offices. Brad Meads, a teacher at Westburn School, suited up as a dinosaur for the event to send the message that teachers' wages are prehistoric.
We're just feeling extremely overwhelmed, and a group of friends and I have decided to dress up like this today to try and make some fun out of a pretty dire situation, because our classes have far too many students in them. We are always way too tired, and we're spending far too much time on our paperwork instead of actually working with our kids and coming up with great lessons for them, really.
Sam Stokes, an economics and physical education teacher at Hornby High School, says he'll be taking industrial action for the long run if that's what it takes to get more money.
I think if you want to keep teachers in the profession, you've just got to pay us more, give us better working conditions. I've got some colleagues here who are out working 15 hours a day, and it needs to be better. Otherwise, people aren't going to come to the profession. Who's going to teach the kids?
Education Minister Chris Hipkins has described today's strike as unjustified. But Anne Jarks from Riccarton High School strongly disagrees.
He's wrong. He's wrong. It's completely justified. We fought for ages to have time to do our job. We've had, for years, we've suffered, and the students have suffered because they haven't had that time. We're not attracting the teachers in. The ones we keep in, we don't manage to keep staying in the profession because for them, it's not worth it. So Chris Hipkins has got it wrong this time. Whatever she says, believe it. I believe her. She's a teacher.
And Myrna Burrows, a teacher from Rolleston Christian School, says teachers' demands are more than just money for money's sake.
Not necessarily financially for us, but more so for support staff in the classrooms, so to help us so that we can be able to teach the children that are in our classes.
In Wellington, protesters took that message onto Parliament grounds, where there was really only one man they wanted to see. And the Education Minister obliged, coming down from his beehive office to address the crowd.
You told us that we need more teachers in classrooms, and we are addressing that.
But his message, calling for patience and emphasising the changes the government is making for schools, did nothing to satisfy striking teachers. Chris Hipkins later told reporters he acknowledges the issues teachers are raising, but the government can't fix every problem overnight. The Education Ministry is trying to bring the teacher unions to facilitated bargaining, but they're resisting, and at this stage there's nothing to stop more industrial action planned by secondary teachers in June and July. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
The high-stakes standoff over allegations of Treasury hacking of budget documents escalated today. National leader Simon Bridges lashed out at the government, accusing it of a witch hunt after spending yesterday trumpeting secret budget details obtained by the party. He also took a swipe at Treasury, as he repeatedly refused to say where he'd got the information. The matter is now in the hands of the police. Treasury says the attack on its system, which happened over about 48 hours, was targeting confidential budget information, and what was accessed appeared to match the information in National's possession. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
First came the statement from Treasury last night revealing the attack and the referral to the police. Soon after, Grant Robertson's office released a statement saying they had contacted the National Party to ask them not to release any more material. Quote, given that the Treasury said they have sufficient evidence that indicates the material is a result of a systematic hack. This morning, National's Simon Bridges came out swinging.
They are incredibly embarrassed. They're not in control of what they are doing, and so they are lashing out and they are having a witch hunt on the National Party. The National Party has acted entirely appropriately the whole way through this matter.
Treasury says there had been more than 2,000 attempts to hack its system since midnight Sunday. It says the information released by National matches some of what was hacked. However, it's not drawing a direct link. Mr Bridges would not say how National obtained its information, but vehemently denied any wrongdoing.
We have acted legally, appropriately, without any hacking or anything approaching that by the National Party, or indeed what Grant Robertson is saying, where he's effectively saying that's how we've got it, he is wrong.
Simon Bridges accused the government of trying to gag the opposition in the run-up to the budget, and he took direct aim at the Finance Minister.
What annoys me here, frankly, is that it should be Grant Robertson here right now explaining and fronting up, because he is misleading New Zealanders. In fact, I'd go as far as to say he's lying. He is smearing the National Party falsely with what he is doing, and he is overseeing gross incompetence in Treasury right now and over the last 24 hours.
He issued this challenge.
He should explain the basis on which he says this. He's saying this information has come from hacking. Well, he needs to front up and explain that. You have a Treasury making all manner of claims. They are misleading New Zealanders right now in what they say. I can be categorical with you. We've done nothing inappropriate. We've done nothing illegal. There has been no hacking.
That challenge went unanswered by Grant Robertson through the course of the morning, and it was initially left to the Prime Minister to front the questions. Jacinda Ardern was quick to distance her Minister from the controversy.
This is a matter for the Treasury. They are the ones that hold the information around what essentially has happened in this situation. Also the ones that made the decision over how they wish to handle it and advised us in the aftermath of taking those decisions. So I see this ultimately as a matter for them.
On his way into parliamentary question time, Mr Robertson was asked what he thought of Mr Bridges' comments directed at him.
The act of a desperate man.
He denied accusing National of hacking.
I didn't say that.
Your statement said.
No, it didn't. I said that the material, that the Treasury believed that the material, it indicated that the material had come from that.
Don't you think
That's the Treasury's advice to me.
Doesn't it constitute, effectively an accusation?
No, it doesn't.
A serious
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't at all. Nobody's actually made the accusation in that way.
In Parliament, Simon Bridges asked the Prime Minister about the statement made by Grant Robertson.
Does she accept Grant Robertson said last night that the material the National Party had obtained, quote, is a result of a systematic hack?
That is not the whole statement that was made. Mr Speaker, what I think we need to make sure is absolutely clear here. No one has made a direct accusation to the National Party.
Simon Bridges asked whether there'd be any consequences.
If the accusation that the information obtained by the National Party as a result of a hack proves to be false, will she stand her Minister of Finance down?
Mr Speaker, again, I actually refer the member to the statements that were made by the Secretary of the Treasury. Again, where he stated it clearly this morning, no accusation against the National Party has been made. The statement that was made, for instance, by the Secretary of the Treasury this morning was the material that was released yesterday came from the same area that was attacked in our systems. It's a statement of fact.
It's still unclear exactly what National did to obtain the secret budget information. One possible option is they accessed a Treasury website that had pages ready to go to publish the documents through a vulnerability in the system. However, Treasury insists no information was put on that page ahead of budget day. There are a raft of questions about what's happened and whether there was any criminality involved, unlikely to be answered until the police have investigated further. National is already under investigation by the Serious Fraud Office relating to the disclosure of party donations and can't afford any whiff of scandal from allegations of dodgy conduct. Grant Robertson and Jacinda Ardern are now trying to refocus attention on the main event tomorrow and hoping the actual budget will put the hack controversy to rest for now. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And we really did want to bring you a bit more clarity about what exactly happened with those budget documents. Unfortunately, Treasury Secretary Gabrielle McLuth and Finance Minister Grant Robertson both declined Checkpoint's interview requests. Simon Bridges hasn't yet responded, so if you're listening, Simon, we're still keen to hear from you. Give us a call. Okay, so the man at the centre of a new book on a high-profile defamation case was stopped, detained and searched at Auckland Airport. Businessman Matt Blomfield was awarded damages by the Human Rights Tribunal in March after it found that whale oil blogger Cameron Slater had defamed him. He launched the book Whale Oil by Margie Thompson last night in Auckland. Mr Blomfield says despite the decision in his favour, he's out of pocket, and as the search on Friday proves, the lies are still harming his reputation and his family. Alex Perrottet reports.
Matt Blomfield launched the book Whale Oil last night in Auckland with author Margie Thompson. The 300-page account details how blogger Cameron Slater published a series of blog posts in 2012 accusing Mr Blomfield of fraud, extortion, criminal involvement with drugs and other things. He says it's taken years to clear his name, but undoubtedly much of the mud has stuck. People should be afraid, he says, of how easily you can be targeted by an online campaign of lies.
It's terrifying. I mean, I often give examples of the sort of things that someone could do to another individual online relatively easily, and you can ruin a year, 2 years, and in my extreme example, 7 years of someone's life, and then suddenly you've got someone who's a pretty damaged individual.
He says he's no conspiracy theorist, but further proof the ordeal isn't over came on Friday afternoon at Auckland Airport. On arrival from a trip to the United States, he and his wife and children were detained and searched for at least 2 hours.
When it got slightly odd, after they had searched all our bags and I had a copy of the manuscript of the book in there, we said, well, you haven't found anything. And I was getting quite angry because my kids were starting to get upset. They were tired. The woman who was the custom officer said, you need to tell me what the book is and the title of the book before we let you through. And I couldn't understand why they would do that. I was furious.
Matt Blomfield says he had no choice but to give the name of the book as the customs officers demanded, breaking the strict embargo. He says he's convinced that the incident was prompted by the same people who have caused him trouble over the last 7 years.
They were looking for something. It did seem odd. I mean, we're a very, very normal-looking family. The kids were all in holiday clothes. We weren't like the suspect. It seemed odd. Something was not right.
Barrister and civil liberties advocate Michael Bott says it appears Mr Blomfield and his family were detained unreasonably.
For someone who's a respected business person coming from overseas with their family from the United States, to be subjected to this sort of high level of intrusive surveillance and questioning seems completely disproportionate.
He says Customs New Zealand has some explaining to do.
This does appear to have the hallmarks of a fishing expedition. And as I say, they went through everything. And so it appears to be, at first glance, some form of state-sanctioned harassment. The actions of the customs officers should be subjected to quite forensic questioning and investigation.
Customs New Zealand would not comment further than their statement published on Twitter, which says there's a number of reasons why they search travellers and can't comment on this case for privacy reasons. Customs says it's happy to talk with Mr Blomfield and give an explanation. Matt Blomfield says one of the worst moments in the struggle to clear his name was when a masked man broke into his property and fired shots at him with a gun. He was then taken into a type of protective custody, moved into a new apartment and had no choice but to homeschool his children. He says authorities and laws need to catch up with online abuse as the damage can take years to repair. Mr Blomfield says he had no financial benefit from the legal action as he knew that Cameron Slater did not have the money to pay for damages. He fought the matter on principle.
There was never going to be a bag of cash. So I went into this knowing that every filing fee, every legal bill was a black hole. There was nothing coming back.
Matt Blomfield says he's now studying for a law degree, but trying to keep a low profile. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And time for a quick bit of feedback now on two stories we've been running today. This on the teachers' strike. Stu has got in contact and says, I just heard someone saying that teachers are working 15 hours a day. Surely this isn't true, says Stu. It would be great if RNZ could do an in-depth investigation into teachers' conditions. 15 hours a day, 2 exclamation marks. I seriously doubt that's anywhere near true, says Stu. So if there are any teachers out there listening, drop us a line. How many hours are you working a day? Is it true? And on the budget leak or hack or whatever it actually is, this person says, I would have thought that if any political party came across any material that they know should not be disclosed to the public, that they would not do so. The leak of the 2019 budget information just highlights the lack of integrity that the National Party displays. Keep your feedback coming. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Health Minister David Clark is live on what the government is and isn't doing about mental health. The mother of 2 boys who died after a horrific car crash is shocked and offended by the sentence given to the driver responsible. And the Aussie teen known as Egg Boy donates $100,000 to the Mosque shooting victims. Do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program so far today. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Here's Susanna with the headlines.
Grant Robertson has denied accusing the National Party of hacking and says he is focused on delivering the budget tomorrow. Nationals leader Simon Bridges says the Finance Minister falsely accused his party. Last night, Treasury Secretary Gabriel McCloof said he found evidence of a deliberate hack of Treasury's systems and referred it to the police. It followed National's release of budget information yesterday morning. National refuses to say where it got its budget information and denies any illegal behaviour. The head of the Criminal Law Association says whoever accessed budget information 2 days ahead of Budget Day could be liable for prosecution. Len Anderson says despite any ease of access, it is still a crime to view information you're not authorised to see. Striking school teachers booed the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, when he spoke at their rally at Parliament today. Mr Hipkins says he was not surprised at the reaction, as teachers have been whipped up into a bit of a frenzy. He says the government will address teachers' concerns, but it has gone as far as it can in this pay round. Wellington commuters are asking why school buses, which continued their routes today despite the school strike, have not been used to replace cancelled passenger services. Bemused bus users took to social media this morning after empty school buses sailed past crowded bus stops. The Drug Foundation has expressed disappointment in the government's response to 2 strong recommendations of the Mental Health and Addiction Inquiry. And those are our headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. And as mentioned in the news there, that the mental health inquiry is out today. Well, not the mental health inquiry itself, but the government has given its response to the recommendations of that inquiry. And it's said that fixing mental health services will take big money, but it has signalled that it will start that investment from tomorrow and tomorrow's budget. But today it announced it accepted in principle, or will give further consideration to 38 of the 40 recommendations from its inquiry into mental health and addiction. Now, that includes setting up an independent mental health and wellbeing commission. They'll also increase access to mental health and addiction services, and they'll establish a national suicide prevention strategy, but they won't adopt a suicide reduction target. And as yet, there are no specific details around funding. Now, Health Minister David Clark joins us now. Good evening, Minister.
Good evening, Lisa.
Just a point of clarification to start off with. You say that you've accepted in principle, or will give further consideration to. So are you going to do those things or not, of the 38 recommendations?
Well, those words mean what they say. Some of them we accept outright, the recommendations, and they just simply need to be implemented. Some of them are around accept in principle. For example, there's one recommendation which focuses on setting up a cross-parliamentary group. We see that as a job for the Parliament, not for the government, if we can make that distinction. And so we accept in principle that cross-party and cross-parliamentary work is a good thing, but we accept it in principle because it's not us as the government that would drive that kind of change.
Right.
And then further consideration means we think there's more work to do in that area. It's not something we're rejecting. We've been clear that there's 2 recommendations we've rejected. Others we are giving further consideration to.
So 38 of the 40 that you've identified today, around 22, I just did a quick calculation, around 22 either fall into that category of accepted in principle or will give further consideration. So what kind of guarantee that you will push forward with the majority of those?
Well, we will do the work that needs to be done. This is a government that's committed to taking mental health seriously. The resources in government have shifted so that we now have a mental health directorate in the Ministry of Health that wasn't there before, and that's building up. We are investing in addictions treatment. We're investing in primary health care. We are making investments in this area because we believe that transformational change is necessary. That's what the inquiry recommended.
Okay, I'm wondering also why you changed your mind on a suicide reduction target, because prior to the election you categorically said that you would commit to a reduction target if you were in government. So what or who changed your mind?
Well, in government, the whole time we've been very clear that we think one suicide is one suicide too many. This is something that we have wrestled with extensively because this is a challenging issue. The evidence is not there to support a target to say that it makes a difference in and of itself. What does seem to make the difference is the resource and the commitment of government and the whole of society actually to make the difference that we need to see. So we went backwards and forwards on this. In the end, we recognised that we weren't actually going to be comfortable with any level of suicide. We think every life matters, and that means that we've got to commit to getting suicides down to no suicides in the longer term.
You're going to work on a national suicide prevention strategy. So how will you measure that success then if you're not having targets or reduction targets?
Well, I think people will make their own judgment on the investments we're making and on the suicide rate and whether we're doing the right things to bring that down. We recognise this as a complex problem. It's not something that's happened overnight, but it is something that we need to take seriously as a country. We need to commit ourselves to reducing suicide, and that urgent work on completing the suicide prevention strategy, I hope we'll see it finished in 8 to 12 weeks. I want to see that in place.
So in essence, you will be using those numbers, the suicide numbers, as a measure, even if you don't categorically state what your target is, won't you? I mean,
yeah, we believe every life matters. So I think those suicide numbers that we have in New Zealand are a national shame. I think we have to tackle suicide. We need to have strategies in place to do that. We also need to support those bereaved by suicide, those who are vulnerable, to make sure people are getting the supports they need to keep them safe.
So a mental health commission is going to be set up. You signalled today at your press conference that it will in essence be a watchdog to hold the government to account. So will you give them any powers to compel you in any way?
They will be... look, I can't get ahead of the budget announcements tomorrow, and there is some further policy work to be done, but I expect to have more announcements to make on that by the end of June.
So the money you indicated may be announced tomorrow for the Commission, but in terms of their authority or power, can you give us more detail on how much teeth you're going to give them?
Those details are going to be finalised in coming weeks.
Okay, so you have said previously that there is a 75% roundabout increase in demand for services over 10 years, right, for mental health services. So would you accept that given the kind of rate of increase that we've got for services, there's no way conceivably that you could keep up with that? Prevention has got to be a large part of this equation.
Prevention is a very important part, and you know, currently we know that half of those people that take their own lives have never been in touch with mental health services. What we also know though is that I think the statistic is 44% in a recent survey had been in touch with their general practice in the prior year. So a lot of people are in touch with their doctors, they're going into primary care, and that is one point of access where we know those who are wrestling with distress, with anxiety, with depression, with mental health issues are making contact. We need to find ways of better supporting them in the primary care setting.
Yeah, I see a lot of mentions in your information release today about crisis service and increase to those kinds of services. So, as a split, what focus are you going to give on prevention? Because we've established you can't keep up with increasing demand at the crisis end of things. So where's the split in priorities?
Well, I think you'll see tomorrow in the budget a significant emphasis on the mild to moderate end. That's what the inquiry into mental health and addiction itself focused on. The first 12 out of the 40 recommendations focused on broadening access, making sure people could get the help they need before smaller problems became bigger problems. So that's firmly where we will be focused. But you'll actually see that hasn't come at the expense of investing in other areas either, because there are many things that need to be done better.
So in terms of access, again, the report said that we were giving access to about 3.7% of people who required it. The recommendation was maybe 20% should be the target. You haven't committed to an actual number. What should it be?
Yeah, there was no recommendation that specifically gave a target. There was a discussion of 20%. A suggestion, that's right. That because by some estimates, 1 in 5 people wrestle with mental distress in any given year. We want to be sure, really, that 100% of people that wrestle with mental distress have the supports they need, no matter whether they get that online through telehealth services at the local level. We are going to need to train a significant workforce. We're going to need to train peer support people, and we're committed to doing that because we actually want everybody who's in distress ultimately to be able to access services.
And I understand that as a principle, but to track how you're going, surely those figures would be useful. So we're sitting at about 3.7%. Why not set a target? I think further government investment will be needed over the years. We won't address everything in this budget, but I think people, when they come to the budget tomorrow, will see that there's a significant investment and that we've laid out a pathway that's credible, that's ambitious, but we make no apology for that, that actually starts to address that need. In opposition, you said there was urgency required around this, but you don't have these targets in mind. You're not revealing how much money is being spent. So are you giving that the urgency it deserves?
Tomorrow there will be plenty of information around the financial support. In terms of urgency, I don't accept that targets make for urgency. What makes for urgency is actually having a focused workforce that's appropriately resourced and also changing the wider culture across our communities to say to people who are in distress, how can I help? How can I support you to get the help that you need when you're in this situation? That change is happening, but actually, as you've alluded to earlier, Lisa, the actual services have not always been available to those who've come forward for them.
We're almost out of time. Very quickly, of the 38 recommendations that you are looking at addressing, how many of those will be dealt with in the budget tomorrow?
I can't give you an exact number, but it's a substantial number.
Is there going to be anything for people's rotting teeth in the budget? You would appreciate that that's been a big issue over the last few days. Any promises that you can deliver us something tomorrow?
I won't be. Obviously, DHBs deal with the hardest end of that need, and there will be an increase in DHB funding. We've committed to funding DHBs more sustainably.
But anything ring-fenced for dental?
I won't be getting into any budget announcements now.
Thanks for joining us this evening, Minister. Appreciate your time. Let's go now to business news with Madison Reedy. Madison, thank you for coming into the studio. What are you talking to me about today?
I'm talking to you about the Reserve Bank releasing its financial stability report. Now, they release that today. They release it every 6 months. Now, this is pretty much the Reserve Bank's pulse on the economy and how it's doing and what they are and aren't concerned about. Now, today they said that the economy is resilient, but as they've been saying for a while now, risks do remain, both locally and internationally, including something that they raised, which was high levels of debt, both in households and on farms, actually, is something they raised. They said that debt levels in households were actually higher than they were in the global financial crisis. So they reckon restrictions on lending, particularly mortgage lending, like loan-to-value restriction ratios, should stay in place.
So presumably most of that debt's people's ginormous mortgages, is it?
Yes. Mostly it is. I mean, that's the major part of what lending is in this country, is particularly to do with property, because the cost of property is so high. But it does span across all lending as well. He was concerned about all levels of debt in that area. I know that this sounds quite boring, but believe me, today it was not actually that boring. This was obviously a report that was released with the background of the Reserve Bank's proposal to make banks hold significantly more capital. Now, the gloves are off at the moment between both the banking sector and its regulator, the Reserve Bank. Banks have said that they reckon such a proposal would cost the economy $1.8 billion a year, and they say that they need a cost-benefit analysis from the Reserve Bank before it goes ahead with this. Now, in addressing all of that today, the Governor, Adrian Orr, he called those assumptions and said that assumptions made by those with, quote, vested interests are astounding and interesting. Now, he said that...
Those are fighting words, aren't they? You don't usually see this kind of public kind of to and fro.
He pulled no punches on this today, and obviously he has been asked about this at length. I mean, particularly journalists have thrown a lot of questions at him about this, so he seems to be getting a little bit sick of it. He did mention, though, with that $1.8 billion price tag that banks have put on it, he's confident that it will not cost that much. And in regards to the whole cost-benefit analysis, he says that the Reserve Bank's proposal was actually based on the entire idea of a net benefit analysis. So he says that's already been done. And he says no one's paid attention to the fact that changes would actually be made over a number of years. So this wouldn't be forced on banks immediately if it was to be implemented. Now, also when he wound up this press conference in Wellington this afternoon, he said that journos, in fact journalists themselves, he said, sorry, we call ourselves journos behind the scenes, don't we? And he said that journalists themselves should be careful to report the facts on this issue. He's blatantly sick, as I said, of being asked these questions, and he's sick of having to defend and justify its reasons for it.
And he had something to say about insurers today as well, did he?
He did. So all of the attention seems to have been on banks, but he also took aim at the insurance industry today. He made a bit of noise about climate change and how that has changed insurance pricing in New Zealand of late. So we should expect to see attention shift from banks to the insurance sector pretty soon. So Adrian, or the governor, says that he wants to ensure that not just banks but also insurers are well capitalised. And he mentioned that it might look soon to increase the amount of buffer that insurance companies have to hold or already do hold above their solvency requirements. Now, in regards to risk-based pricing, which almost all insurance companies are doing now, which is where they have hiked premiums where in places where environmental risks are more likely, like earthquakes and floods. In regards to that, he says that he wants to have a look at what's happening there in regards to pricing and ensure that wherever there's hikes in regards to premiums, that there's also drops in premiums in less risky areas. So he wants to make sure that is actually coming to a benefit for some too. And he also said that there's not enough competition in this sector. And that was quite a surprising statement from him. I put that to their Insurance Council Chief Executive Tim Grafton, and he says that there is sufficient competition in this sector, as you would expect him to defend his industry. But he actually says he wasn't surprised that insurers are next in line for Reserve Bank scrutiny. He says, though, insurers here are well capitalised and that they can cover the cost of major events like earthquakes or floods as they have in the past. But there was one part where he seemed to be singing from the same songbook as banks, albeit in different lyrics because they're quite different industries. He said that higher capital buffers would ultimately cost consumers, and the increased cost of doing insurance business would ultimately be felt and passed on to policyholders. And he said it would also affect competition.
Interesting. What else been going on today? Markets. Give us a bit of a whip around.
The NZX Top 50 index closed down 0.25% again tonight. That's a fall of 27 points to close at 10,096. And the New Zealand dollar, that's buying at 65.4 US cents, 94.4 to the Australian, and 51.7 British pence.
Thank you, Madison. Madison Reedy, Juno, with our business news. Hawke's Bay Winery says it was horrified to learn workers it hired through a contractor were not getting paid. 12 workers from Papua New Guinea who were connected with Destiny Church ended up working for free on Te Mata Estate after companies run by church members pocketed the cash. But Destiny Church denies it has any connection with the three offenders, saying they're not members or affiliated in any way with its congregation. Here's our Hawke's Bay reporter Anusha Bradley with the story.
It all started in 2016 when PNG national Christina Kewa-Swarbrick and her husband Anthony brought 12 workers from her hometown to New Zealand on a program they called Global Exposure. The Labour Inspectorate manager Kevin Finnegan says the workers paid more than $1,000 each to get here and expected to get paid work.
They were recruiting individuals in Papua New Guinea to come to New Zealand to get employment, to learn new skills, and get some life experiences and to take them back to the islands, to their families.
The group's first stop was in Waikato, where male workers took part in the Man Up program at Miss Swarbrick's Destiny Church, while the females helped out in the kitchen, catering for church events. Kevin Finnegan says Miss Swarbrick then met Martha Fretton through a mutual contact at Destiny Church, and she arranged to help them find training in Hawke's Bay.
It appears that Miss Swarbrick struggled to find suitable work. She got connected up with Ms Fretton, who is a labour on hire contractor. She had work. They came to some arrangement. Unfortunately, that arrangement didn't appear to entail actual payment for the employees.
The The Swarbricks invoiced Te Mata Estate for more than $25,000 for the work carried out by the PNG visitors. Kevin Finnegan says the case serves as a warning to vineyards who need to monitor their supply chains and ensure they're only using legitimate contractors.
A few phone calls, a little bit of dancing around the websites and just having a look at things, as asking for, can I just have a quick look at their employment agreements, for example. In terms of if they were RSE, you only have to look at the immigration website to look at the list of RSE employers who are accredited, because that is quite a process to go through. And ICM definitely wasn't a RSE employer.
The chief executive of Te Mata Estate, Nick Buck, says they were horrified to learn the workers were not paid.
Obviously, our primary concern, though, through all this has been the workers, and we've been appalled about that. But yes, we were misled about this by ICM over a 4-week period in 2016. There is no evidence that ICM had been involved in anything like this previously.
Nick Buck says the vineyard now only works with one accredited labour supplier to ensure this doesn't happen again. The Labour Inspectorate estimates ICM owed more than $31,000 in unpaid wages and holiday pay to the 12 workers. The Employment Relations Authority determined only Martha Fretton could be classified as the employer in this case, not the Swarbricks, and it's ordered her to pay $30,000 for what it labels gross negligence. Her company, ICM, has since been placed into liquidation, and documents filed with the company's office show she also owes more than $100,000 to Inland Revenue. A spokesperson for Destiny Church says neither Martha Fretton nor Christina Kewa and Anthony Swarbrick are members of the church, going as far as saying that no one at the church has ever heard of them. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
And let's return to our story earlier in the program about the teachers' strike. Now, Stu got in contact questioning whether teachers really work 15 hours a day, which was comment one of the teachers made in John Gerritson's piece. Sonia has got in touch to say, hi, I flattered with 3 teachers. They all worked extremely long hours, marking and working through the evening. They were wonderful, caring, conscientious teachers, and the work stress they were under was unreasonable. I saw 2 of them leave the profession within a few years of starting. Observing their workloads, I was completely put off ever being a teacher, says Sonia. Teachers need to be valued and treated better. Now, Jeff's also got in touch to say, my wife and eldest daughter are secondary school teachers. They both typically work 10 hours a day and 5 to 6 hours each weekend. In addition, my wife coaches school basketball, and this involves an additional 2 hours twice a week for training, 2 hours one night a week for a local game, and 4 hours once a week on Wednesday night for the team to participate in a regional competition. Don't have a calculator handy, but that sounds like a lot of hours. It is 9 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The mother of 2 boys who died after a horrific crash last Easter says she is shocked and offended at the sentence handed down to the truck driver that killed them. Sia Mosaferi and Mohi Sharifi were driving to Wellington on Good Friday when their car was hit by a truck after it failed to stop in a line of traffic on the desert road. Their 4-year-old son, Artin, and his 10-week-old brother, Radin, were in the back seat and both died. The truck driver, John Baptiste Barber, who is 71 years old, had failed to have the minimum rest period leading up to the crash. Barber was today sentenced to 3 months community detention, 150 hours of community work, and disqualified from driving for 12 months. Mohi Sharifi spoke to our reporter Nita Blake-Person about the sentence, and she said it was insulting.
I am absolutely shocked. I'm offended, and I just feel that I lost my boys so lightly to nothing today. No outcome today would have brought my boys back, but I just feel insulted. I just feel that, how lightly this was taken is how lightly the lives of my boys was taken. It's made the pain all so much worse. I'm hurting even more that even the judge couldn't couldn't see the depth of the situation. Even the judge took it lightly.
What were some of the comments from the judge today?
There's two things that struck me that was just like a hammer hit to my head, that she couldn't consider it as fatigued because there was no evidence to show that it was as a result of fatigue, although he was working over hours. So I don't know what these legal hours mean. If the result of not taking those hours does not mean fatigue, then why do you put these laws out there? Aren't these laws to show, to control fatigue? So if you're not obeying those laws, you should be considered fatigued. So obviously that driver's never going to say I was fatigued or I was asleep behind the wheel. Also, the second thing was a last-minute guilty plea is not considered remorse. Remorse should come from heart. It's a personal decision. It should have been an approach from the driver to us, which was never made. But just a last-minute guilty plea, which was really, to me, out of despair because he couldn't see any way out of it, that's what it was. It wasn't out of remorse. It wasn't out of understanding our situation. And the judge basically put a tick beside all of these with the decision she made today.
What confidence does this give you in the justice system?
Absolutely nothing. And to be honest, I can see why the road toll in New Zealand is increasing day by day. I can now understand why there are so many fatal accidents every day that we read about in the news, because no one is taking this seriously. Not even the justice system here is taking this seriously. This is not the message you want to put out there, that a person that has had consciously made the decision to break the law and therefore result in such a big accident, all he's going to take is going to stay a few months at home? Is that all that it is? I don't think anyone's getting scared. If anyone is taking a message that, I should be a bit more careful, no one's going to take this message from this decision.
12 months disqualification for driving for this driver. Would it worry you to think he could be back on the road in another year?
Exactly. That's what we were just talking about, that in another year he's going to be back out there. I know there's a lack of truck drivers, so he's probably going to be employed again by the same company, and he's back on the roads. And obviously, if he had learned a lesson from all his previous careless driving charges, this accident wouldn't have happened. And from today, obviously, he's not going to take a lesson because it's just a few months at home. And then he's out there doing it again. And the justice system is just basically allowing all this to happen.
Do you have any messages for that driver?
To be honest, I have a lot of message to the justice system now. It's not only the driver now, but I have a lot to say to the justice system who is approving everything. To me, this is not how you want to stop something from happening. And the driver, you basically ruined our life. You've ruined not just what we had, but what we will ever have. Anything close to happiness will never come for us, because in every moment of happiness, from our little boy that I have at the moment, even in the singlest moment of joy, all I can remember is my other two boys. So it's going to affect any chance of happiness we have for the rest of our life, and not just today.
And that was Mohi Sharifi speaking to our reporter Nita Blake-Person there. Time for a bit of your feedback. A lot of you are getting in touch about the the story about teachers and the thorny issue of whether or not they actually do work 15 hours a day, which is a suggestion that one of them made. Alex says, my partner is a teacher and is at school at 8 a.m. and regularly works until 11 p.m. at night, preparing, researching, marking and doing the massive reporting required. She has kids who are different learners and is constantly finding ways to support their learning. She faces a range of other issues that she and teachers and schools need to solve. Hungry kids, for example, who can't learn. But it also is a humanity issue. She and colleagues work long, long hours and she has dedicated her life to teaching. David, who got in touch via Facebook, says, Kia ora, I'm a secondary school teacher. Last Thursday, I worked from 7:45 a.m. till 9:30, not 15 hours, but not far off. An average day, David says, is 11 hours. I stopped work at 11 p.m. after making some time for family between getting home and starting marking and admin and planning. And I work a half day in the weekend. Where is the consideration of my well-being in the ever-increasing expectations and demands and the growing complexity of the needs of the young people I teach? A texter has got in contact and says, I'm a scab, so didn't strike, but I was in by 8, left at 4, so I could cook dinner. I still have 3 hours left of feedback and marking. No morning tea or lunch break. I am an English teacher and work between 50 and 60 hours a week. And I am never ahead of the workload. I could be even more fabulous than I am, but I'm too exhausted by the end of the day to do anything extra. This is for $73,000 a year, says that person. And Jane has got in contact to say that she works 14 hours a day and 6 days on the weekend. Another one in from Judith, who has emailed with this piece of feedback. I don't work 15 hours a day, but I work at least 10 hours per day, Monday to Friday, and then another 4 to 5 hours every weekend. As we are a small school and can't afford a caretaker, my husband often works a couple of hours as well over a weekend, doing the lawns and repairs, etc. for free. And this one from a teacher of 30 years, I love it, but I'm frustrated that it seems this government is not listening. There is no feeling of genuine dialogue.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Drug Foundation is disappointed the government has refused to tackle 2 strong recommendations from the Mental Health and Addiction Inquiry. It recommended a stricter regulatory approach to the sale and supply of alcohol. It also urged the government to replace criminal sanctions for the possession of controlled drugs for personal use with fines or a referral. The government has today refused to accept those recommendations, saying the drug issue has already been considered by Parliament in the Misuse of Drugs Act. The Foundation's Executive Director Ross Bell says the government's kicked the issues aside, and that's disappointing.
You can't extract some of the things and say, well, we're not going to do all of these things. So, yeah, we are disappointed the government hasn't come out and said, we've heard it from the Law Commission, we've heard it from this inquiry, we will reform our drug laws properly.
Ross Bell from the Drug Foundation. The Finance Minister denies making any accusation of hacking against the National Party. Nationals leader Simon Bridges has gone on the attack, saying Grant Robertson has falsely accused his party. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The Treasury has said it found evidence of a deliberate and systematic hack of its systems following the release of budget information by National and referred the matter to police. Grant Robertson's office released a statement last night about the hack and the National Party. He denies it was an attack on the opposition party, saying he was only reiterating the original statement made by the Treasury. The Prime Minister is backing Mr Robertson, saying there was no accusation made against National. National won't say how it got its budget information, but denies any illegal behaviour. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
A criminal lawyer says whoever accessed the budget information prematurely could be liable for prosecution. Treasury says it has evidence it was the target of a cyber attack that involved 2,000 attempts to breach its system in 48 hours. Len Anderson, who's the president of the Criminal Bar Association, says unauthorised access is covered under the Crimes Act and the test is pretty simple. He likens it to a car. If you try a million keys until one fits, it still doesn't give you the right to open the door. He says despite how easy it is for the information to be found, if you're not authorised to view it, it's a crime. Striking school teachers booed the Education Minister Chris Hipkins when he spoke at their rally at Parliament today. Nearly 50,000 members of the Educational Institute and the post-primary teachers went on strike today in support of their collective agreement claims. Mr Hipkins told teachers the government was trying to improve the school system, but it could not do everything at once. Later, he told reporters he was not surprised by the negative response from the crowd.
Not particularly surprising. I think they've been whipped up into a bit of a frenzy. But we've always been very clear that we're listening to the concerns teachers are raising. We will address them, but we've gone as far as we think we can go in this pay round.
The Education Ministry is trying to organise facilitated bargaining with the teacher unions, but says both unions have objected. Wellington commuters are querying why school buses, which continued their routes today despite the school strike, were not used to replace cancelled passenger services. After weeks of random cancellations, Metlink announced last week it has temporarily suspended some morning peak bus services on 12 routes operated by NZ Bus due to driver shortages. Bemused passengers took to social media after empty school buses sailed past crowded bus stops. A Metlink spokesperson says, however, to cancel school buses to run a commuter service would have caused significant roster problems. He says it was possible the strike could have been called off at short notice and school services would have had to be reinstated. Furthermore, some schools remained open to care for students. Only 2 people injured in the March Mosque attacks remain in hospital. The Canterbury District Health Board says they are now both in Burwood Hospital, which specialises in rehabilitation. A 5-year-old girl who was an Auckland Starship has been discharged from hospital and is getting rehabilitation care. In early May, a Turkish citizen injured in the attacks died in Christchurch Hospital, taking the number of people killed to 51. The lawyer for an Australian teenager who's donated $100,000 to those affected by the Christchurch shootings says his family is very proud of him. 17-year-old Will Connolly egged the far-right Senator Fraser Anning, who blamed Muslim immigration for the attacks. He received thousands of dollars of donations to help with his legal costs, but his lawyer Peter Gordon says he did the work pro bono, and Will was determined to see the money go where it's needed.
He didn't need it for legal expenses and he didn't want to use it for any personal benefit, and he felt that the right thing to do was to have it go to the victims of the Christchurch tragedy, and it's taken a few weeks to get it all assembled through the GoFundMe page, but it's now been done, and so the family are all very thrilled and very proud of him. It's, I think, a very happy ending to what was a quite strange tale.
Peter Gordon says the teenager has been embarrassed by the attention on him, believing it takes away from the mosque victims. It's 6:05. The Northern Stars are confident they can defeat the reigning champion Southern Steel in the ANZ Premiership preliminary final tonight in Invercargill. The Stars will feature in their first ever final series while the Steel search for a premiership three-peat. The Stars played their third match against the Steel only last week, going down 63-46. But coach Kitty Wills says now is the time to play their best netball.
We've earned our spot here, and so now it's time to get out there and enjoy being in the moment and playing our best netball. We've got a lot to prove, but for us it's not about that anymore. It's about us doing a really good job together as a unit, because this unit has worked really, really hard together, and they're a great bunch of girls and they want to do it for each other more than anything else.
Kitty Wells, the winner of tonight's game, will play the Pulse in the grand final on Monday. Players are now allowed to wear goggles in rugby. World Rugby has approved an amendment to the laws of the game that will enable eye protection at all levels. The announcement has been welcomed by Italy First Five Ian McKinley, who recently became the first wearer of goggles in a senior international during a trial.
They've been hugely important to my development, but also as well it's a massive day for kids as well if they need the goggles from a protective side of things or to help with the vision. So I'm just very, very grateful that this has come through.
Ian McKinley lost the sight in one eye after being caught by a stray boot. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, episode 2 of our BBC documentary marking the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landings focuses on the folk at ground control. Simon Morris reviews the latest Aladdin flick, and also a movie about J.R.R. Tolkien as opposed to one based on his books. And we hope to have a few participants in the Wellington Jazz Festival jamming on the sofa. All on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Severe weather warnings and watches are in place for many areas. Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taihape. Mainly fine today. Isolated showers tomorrow. More frequent for Taranaki and Waitomo, with possible late thunderstorms. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Fine weather apart from showers and gale nor'westerlies for Wairarapa tomorrow. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taumaranui, Taupo, Nelson and Marlborough. Rain spreading north this evening and tomorrow with heavy falls, possible thunderstorms in the west. Severe gale northerlies for exposed parts of Wellington and Marlborough tomorrow. For Bulla, Westland, Fiordland and Canterbury High Country. Rain with heavy falls and squally thunderstorms, strong nor'westerlies, gales in exposed places. For the remainder of Canterbury, also North Otago and Dunedin, mainly fine, variable high cloud, nor'westerly gales. Central Otago, Clutha and Southland, scattered rain, clearing later tomorrow, nor'westerly gales. Chatham Islands, showers this afternoon, fine tomorrow, possible late fog. RNZ National with Indira Stewart and First Up, back tomorrow morning at 5. It's now 6:08.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A war of words is escalating between the National Party leader and the Finance Minister over the leak of tomorrow's budget and Treasury's claims it was hacked. Simon Bridges dug his heels in today, calling Grant Robertson a liar for putting the blame on National for what Treasury says was a deliberate and systemic hack of its website. Mr Bridges said National has done nothing wrong.
We have acted legally, appropriately, without any hacking or anything approaching that by the National Party, or indeed what Grant Robertson is saying, where he's effectively saying that's how we've got it, he is wrong.
But Grant Robertson says he never accused National of the hack.
I didn't say that.
Your statement said.
No, I didn't. I said that the material, that the Treasury believed that the material, it indicated that the material had come from that.
Don't you think
that's the Treasury's advice to me.
Doesn't it constitute, effectively an accusation?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't at all. Nobody's actually made the accusation in that way.
And while Treasury Secretary Gabriel McLough has referred the matter to police, IT and tech experts are saying it's likely National's early access to budget documents was probably not the work of a sophisticated hacker. They say it's more likely that an amateur computer sleuth just got lucky. But while use of the words hacked and leaked have been thrown around, what do they actually mean? And has anything illegal happened? Emma Hatton reports.
Treasury says it has evidence its systems were deliberately and systematically hacked. But Simon Bridges says the information wasn't the result of a hack, despite refusing to confirm where it had come from. Technology commentator Paul Brislin says hacking is hard to define.
We don't really ever nail it down as to what it actually is. In law, they talk about unlawful use of a computer system or an IT network, and that's as good a phrase as any. It's the unauthorised access of information stored on a computer.
Mr Brislin says that immediately raises questions around what does unauthorised access mean.
A lot of hacking that we've seen in the past has really been not hacking at all. It has been people finding out that they can see information that the people who put the information online really didn't want to put online in the first place and didn't realise would be visible.
Criminal Bar Association President Len Anderson says unauthorised access is covered under the Crimes Act, and the test is pretty simple.
Documents that are put on the internet that are there publicly, there's a general invitation to view them because they are public. But if they're not, if they're put behind some kind of firewall, then the issue of authorisation to access applies. And it's just like if you think of a locked car, people try millions of keys and eventually find one that fits. That doesn't entitle them to open the car door.
Information security consultant Jorg Buss, whose company Darkscope investigates sources of cyber attacks, says based on what is known, there are two possibilities for how the information was made public. One is that Treasury's website had a security weakness that was exploited, and the other is that the documents were uploaded to the Treasury website, hidden, but the folder they were in was not locked down. He says spider crawl software, which is free and legal to download, would detect such a flaw. It works by searching hidden folders on a website and trying different URLs to see if any match up.
A spider tries different paths which are not visible normally and tries them out if there's some feedback. In most cases, it will be this source is not available, but in some cases, someone gets lucky and there is a path or a URL which is then available and which maybe hosts then the information.
However, the Treasury Secretary, Gabriel McLough, says no documents were accidentally loaded to the website, and the information they have suggests a targeted, persistent, deliberate attack. Mr Brislin says it's unusual that 2,000 attempts over 48 hours warranted a cause for concern, given that this is not an uncommon amount of times that websites can be probed for information. He says the fact that this is what triggered a referral to police indicates a slightly more obvious hack attempt, like password resets. It's unclear whether the attacks were on Treasury's website or the department's internal servers.
The GCSB declined to comment as the matter is now under police investigation. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
Still more feedback coming in about, on the debate of how many hours teachers actually work. This is obviously prompted by the strike today. This one from Louise. I'm so sick of hearing people go on about teachers' holidays, she says in inverted commas. Those 12 weeks may not be student contact, but that does not mean teachers are not working. It is as outdated as saying teachers work 9 till 3. There are 10 callback days a year to begin with when schools can call teachers into school. And then if you add up all those hours teachers work in term time and even over a 40-hour week, you might find we are owed hours. I'd be happy for any of those detractors to join me in my classroom any day of the week. If it's such a good deal, Louise says, why aren't people falling over themselves to train as teachers? But this one from a texter who says, gotta call BS on the 15-hour days. Try finding a teacher still at work after 4 p.m. or during the 12 to 16-week school holidays. Teachers do marking during their teach periods. Once you have your lesson plans sorted, it's a very sweet number, says that texter. Is it a sweet number? Let us know. Text 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on that. A Christchurch family who have seen their mum go in and out of mental health facilities says the government needs to back up their promises around mental health reform with action. In response to the mental health inquiry, the government today announced it would quickly set up an independent new commission and widen access to mental health services. But ahead of tomorrow's budget, no funding or implementation details were released. We wanted to hear from those who have direct experience with the mental health system. Our reporter Logan Church and videographer Simon Rogers pick up the story from Central Christchurch.
For Sela Whaletulu-Fasi, her mental health journey has been long and tough.
I have been diagnosed with bipolar, anxiety and depression, bipolar 2. And a couple of years ago, when I was 6 months pregnant with my 6th child, I became quite deeply depressed and suicidal.
That landed her at Hill Mawson Hospital in 2016.
That experience was not good, I would say. I was in there one night, and the biggest thing I remember hearing was anguish and anger. Just as in my room, hearing screaming, a lot of angry screaming, a lot of hurt people.
Her husband, Leo, was the one who decided to pick up the phone and seek help from mental health services, something Sela told him not to do under any circumstances.
She made the call. She told me to make the call, never to call for help, probably because of the stigma around it. And so, I didn't want to fail her and go against what she wanted. But I had no other option, so I picked up the phone probably like 3-4 times and kept hanging up, because I think anyone in that position finds it hard to, you don't know what the next step is.
And for eldest son Favour, who was 14 at the time, it was up to him to help pick up the slack.
I helped around the house and looked after siblings when it was needed, and so I think that that helped her a lot.
2 years on from her last admission to Hill Mawson Hospital, Sela's bipolar disorder is managed through medication. She describes her life now as amazing, and she puts that down to her family, especially her husband Leo, who is standing right beside her today.
He held basically the well-being, I'd say, of our entire family, and we kind of refer to him as our parachute, where sometimes... in those situations, I couldn't help him carry the load. And I'm pretty crazy in my personality anyway. So when I was unwell, and he is literally jumping off the cliff, catching all of us, and making sure that it wasn't just me getting back to wellness, it was that all our children were well.
Today, the government announced it was accepting in principle 38 of 40 recommendations flagged in the recent mental health inquiry. Among them, a new mental health commission, and making it easier to access mental health services. But what wasn't announced today was a plan to make all that happen.
It's not really clear as to what that all means. what does it mean to have more access to mental health services when you're mild to moderate needs. So it won't be clear to a lot of people.
It's common knowledge that Māori and Pacifica communities are overrepresented in mental health statistics. Māori adults are 1.5 times more likely than non-Māori adults to report a high or very high probability of having an anxiety or depressive disorder. And today's announcement did not include any specific steps to address that. I asked Sela, who is Samoan, if there needs to be more action on this.
Absolutely, there needs to be a dedicated plan for Māori Pacific, but I hear it all the time that it should be, if it's good enough for one, it's good enough for all, and yet those statistics will continue to rise. So it's awkward for me to answer that because I'm Pacific, but for me and my children, my children are proud of the system. I want to make sure that there's a dedicated plan that will mean that their wellness, that those rates aren't going to be impacting them.
Sela says that in some ways she is lucky. She has a loving family who have supported her in her journey. But not everyone has that.
It's really hard to access support in mental health and to know who you can go to or whether you fit criteria. When you're going on a mental health journey, criteria doesn't even come into your head, you just want help.
Help that Sela hopes might become more accessible for those struggling with mental illness. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
It's 19 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Australian teenager known as Egg Boy has donated $100,000 to those affected by the Christchurch Mosque attacks. Will Conley posted on Instagram saying that the money had been transferred to the Christchurch Foundation and Victim Support. It comes as Victim Support announces that after 2 months, its Give a Little page is closing down. Elizabeth Brown reports.
17-year-old Will Connolly shot to fame in March when he egged the far-right Senator Fraser Anning as he repeated comments blaming Muslim immigration for the mosque shootings.
When people are getting attacked in their own...
Fraser Anning's response was to start punching the Melbourne teenager, and as the video went viral, Will Connolly became forever Egg Boy. Speaking in an interview with Australia's 10 Network in the week after the incident, he explained his actions.
After that tragedy in Christchurch, I thought the world should be supporting all those victims with giving them love and passion, and the Senator released a statement which was pretty much a divisive hate speech, blaming the victims for the attack, and I was just flat out disgusted.
Facing potential legal action, money poured in on 2 GoFundMe pages, which were set up to cover Will's legal costs. But early on, he'd made it clear he had no intention of keeping it.
I understand what I did was not the right thing to do. However, this egg has united people and, money has been raised, tens of thousands of dollars has been raised for those victims. It's going to help people affected by the tragedy at Christchurch.
The police decided not to lay charges, but that didn't stop the donations. In his Instagram post, Will said his lawyer, Peter Gordon, worked for him pro bono and the money wasn't his to keep. He said to the victims of the tragedy, "I wholeheartedly hope that this can bring some relief to you. Keep spreading the love." Peter Gordon says after battling a bit of red tape, the almost $100,000 has been transferred to Christchurch.
Whilst he's very grateful to everyone from around the world who contributed money to assist him, he didn't need it for legal expenses and he didn't want to use it for any personal benefit, and he felt that the right thing to do was to have it go to the victims of the Christchurch tragedy, and it's taken a few weeks to get it all assembled through the GoFundMe page, but it's now been done, and so the family are all very thrilled and very proud of him. We're very proud of him too, and it's, I think, a very happy ending to what was a quite strange tale.
The chief executive of the Christchurch Foundation, Amy Carter, says the money will be equally divided between the foundation and Victim Support. She says it's a significant donation among the many they've received.
He's a young man and it shows some incredible maturity to pass this amount of money.
So I made calls today to the other 3 MDs.
Oh, yeah? And how did that go down?
Oh, well, I had to have conversation.
And how did Oscar take it?
No, Oscar was great. He essentially suggested he wasn't the guy.
Yeah,
Took himself out.
Yeah, he knew that it was going to be not...
He took himself out that day, like I said, he took himself out of the race by not responding to a single community.
same lesson twice. This person says, I'm an English teacher of 25 years. I still plan every lesson, tweaking and creating resources and activities in response to the needs of students in front of me. You will find me in my office until at least 5:30 most days with a 7:30 a.m. start. And this texter says, my teacher friend who I flattered with would bring home her student class assignments to mark in her own time. She would spread them all over our living room, tell us how the assignment worked, and we would mark them all together. Saved her a lot of unpaid work, they say. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Drug Foundation is criticising the government for not taking up the Mental Health Inquiry's recommendations on controlled drugs and restricting alcohol sales. Grant Robertson says he did not accuse the National Party of hacking over the early release of budget information. Striking teachers have told the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, the government's offers are not enough. And the mother of 2 young boys killed in a car crash last Easter says the sentence given to the truck driver who rear-ended them is insulting. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
I don't think people knew who to vote for if they cared.